welcome to part 3 about our series on having a God-honoring board without wanting to make you go crazy. Part 1, we talked about what does a board look like? How should your board function? What is the role there of a board of directors? Part 2, we talked about things to consider when adding board members. Here, part 3, I want to talk about things to consider or things to avoid when we're talking about board of directors and things to kind of stay clear of in order to have a truly God-honoring board. So let's get into this. For those that don't know me, my name is Ken McQuiller. Nonprofit Missionary is my organization. It's a grant writing and consulting organization for nonprofits, specifically faith-based nonprofits, so that you can stay focused on building the kingdom of God. We'll help you stay focused on the funding. So yeah, let's talk about board of directors. This was kind of a series that I've wanted to do for a minute, just to kind of have a focus on what's important. And I know sometimes board of directors can be so confusing and so frustrating. So I wanted to kind of get into that a little bit and talk about some things to avoid, because with board of directors, I can say for myself, I have made mistakes. I've had people quit on me overnight. I've had some frustration with how I've communicated stuff to the board. I've had several board members say, we're in, we vote them in, and then they stay for one meeting or no meetings, and that's it. And I want to help you try to avoid that. So the first thing to keep in mind, and this is as a general thing to keep you out of a lot of trouble, avoid conflict of interest at all costs. If you don't know what a conflict of interest is, it's basically when you have a board member that has financial gain based on decisions that are made on your organization. So when you're looking from a legalistic IRS type of perspective, one thing is be careful on having relatives on your board, particularly spouses and children. According to the IRS, spouses and children are kind of the only actual relationships in that way, and also people that live in your household. Avoid that because, first of all, if you try to create a board of directors and you're starting an organization, in order to get approval from the IRS, if your last name is Smith and your board members were Smith, they would probably kick you out and say you can't do that. Or they'd probably reject your application, I should say. So when you're creating a board, you basically have to have this sense of diversity, but not even just with relatives or spouses or anything like that. Anyone that can financially gain, it's important to just lay out, are they a good fit because of that? So, for example, let's say you're doing your programming from this facility and it's owned by ABC Business Corporation, and they're giving you a pretty good deal on it. Having that leader on your board can be considered a conflict of interest. That's not to say they can't be on your board, but with specific directions, specific decisions, they have to be on the outside and not talk about it. And like I said, you probably want to get away with everyone being related to you, but having one person, I just say be very careful, especially when you're talking financial stuff. Because let's say if you do have your spouse on the board and you're talking about setting the salary, having your spouse in on that conversation is a little too conflict of interesty. So you just want to try to avoid some of those type of things. Having a conflict of interest policy is critical. A lot of places will have you list out who your conflicts of interest are ahead of time. That way you can explain, okay, A, B, and C, everything is good to go. That way, if there is ever a vote on salary and you have a spouse or you have a kid or you have a parent that's a part of the board, you can also make a note in the minutes that they did not vote. But yeah, try to avoid conflict of interest if you can. I know, especially with smaller and startup nonprofits, it's harder, but try to avoid it the best you can. Also, if you have if half of your board is all related, then it's going to create a very unique power struggle. And more for drama's sake, you may want to avoid that. Number 2, on things to avoid with board of directors, poor removal policies. I talked about this last episode. When you are looking at adding board members, you want to always make sure that you have your bylaws all set. But make sure your bylaws are also set on how to remove people, because you want to make sure that they are removed the right way, especially if they leave meth. Because the last thing you want to do is have a board member try to sue you based on how they're leaving the organization. You want to make sure that those removal processes are proper. I've referenced a few times on here, even with your executive director, you want to make sure that the removal process is laid out. In Bible school, we were told about a story where a pastor was having an affair. The board fired him, but then he sued because he felt like the board fired them improperly. And he won because, according to the bylaws, his vote counted for 75% of the vote, and obviously he didn't vote for himself to be fired. So technically, he shouldn't have been fired based on the way that the bylaws were written. That's why it's important to look at the bylaws. Removing someone just because, removing someone, it has to be done the proper way. And for most people, it has to be a resignation in writing, which I would say, regardless of how tenuous the situation is, you need to have it in writing. Or you need to have it reflected in the minutes, we unanimously voted Jane Doe to be removed from the board effective immediately. Whatever, you have to have a vote on it or something. You want to have it on record. That way, if there's ever any legal case against you, you have it there strictly in the bylaws. But having the proper removal procedures helps. I talked about transition last time and having the sense of, I know that this person is going to be ending their time soon. That way we could create a transition plan, having someone new in there and all that. But also just from a legal sense, to avoid you a lot of heartache, to avoid weird drama. Because imagine if you're oh, John Doe was supposed to be on the board and is not here and hasn't shown up for a year. We have to figure out how to remove them. And then you don't know. You always want to have the bylaws as your backup to say, this is our process and this is how we do it. And once you have that, I think you should be all set. So avoid that. And sometimes you can avoid that by doing number 3, and that's avoiding fuzzy roles. I think when people are unclear about what they're supposed to be doing, there's less frustration. Because there are some people where it's the expectation as a board member is to fundraise, which there is that expectation. But also, if you have never made that expectation clear, how would they know what you need to do? Because I think most people, when they join a board, they want to serve, they're passionate about what you do. But also, a lot of times they don't know what they're supposed to do. And I think it's just important to have those clear expectations. For our coffee shop, there's not a lot of fundraising that happens. I'm going to probably change that in the upcoming year. But there's not a lot of fundraising that happens. But I do need some advisory stuff. I need some volunteer time. I need some just kind of general advisory. I talked about in part 1 about having an advisory board. Our coffee shop is definitely more advisory than any of the other types. But for some people, fundraising is critical in order to keep the organization running because they don't have any revenue coming in through other means. It's strictly through fundraising, whether you're talking grants, individuals, plan giving, whatever. And I think having that expectation up front that you are on this board, you are here to fundraise, is an important conversation to have. Or let's say you need people to help with the organization because the influx of people is just so overwhelming. It has to be clear. And something that I could suggest, I've had our board do this, and that's signing a letter of agreement. Like, I agree that I will attend all board meetings when possible. I will review all documents before the board meeting. So when you're talking about, hey, let's look at financials, they already know what to do. They're not like, oh, what is that like? Like, they already have the questions signed up because they've taken the time ahead of time. I agree. I think I have it phrased something like this. I agree that within my means, before Thanksgiving, I will give a financial contribution that's meaningful to me for this organization. I don't say it's the biggest gift because I hope that going to church and tithing would be your biggest gift, but also giving a meaningful gift. A $5 donation is not going to, let's be honest. So with all that, I think it's important to have just that letter of agreement so that way people also know what they're expecting. Also on that letter of agreement, I say that I will get out all information as quickly as possible. I'll make sure you are well equipped once we enter meeting with agendas and supporting documents and things like that. So having fuzzy roles can be really, really hard because then what happens is the board member is like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. And then the board chair and the executive director are like, this is what you're supposed to be doing. Why aren't you doing it? So having those clear roles can really help a lot of that frustration. So avoid fuzzy roles. And the last thing, we have to avoid making it look less like ministry. Especially when you're looking from this is a corporate organization, don't get me wrong, like having those structures in place, it's important and everything like that. And doing things the proper way, whether it's like following Robert's Rule of Order, having the proper paperwork in order, like having all of that is important, but also recognize that it's still a position of ministry. It's still serving, and you're serving this organization in this capacity. So if we keep seeing it as this is a business agenda that we have to get through and not say, I wonder how the Holy Spirit can kind of interrupt this, or not opening it up in prayer, or not even just having a time of prayer. Like, I'm not saying make it a worship service, but also it is ministry. And maybe what's on the agenda isn't as important as gathering together and talking about struggles and praying for one another and praying for the organization and praying for the vision and the mission and the values and everything like that. So don't see it just as this is a business thing that we have to get done. See it as this is an opportunity for God to do some ministry in our hearts, for God to sanctify us in different ways. Because trust me, sanctification can happen in a lot of different ways. Sometimes sanctification happens in frustration. Like, I can't tell you how frustrating it can be to have the feeling of, okay, I finally got a couple board of directors that I'm really excited about. Like, we're making some momentum. And then 2 of them quit within a couple of months of each other. And the 2 also went to a total of 1 meeting. It's hard. It's annoying. It's a struggle. But I think when we look at ministry from a different lens, when we look at it as this is ministry and I'm trying to disciple these people, if they leave, yeah, it still hurts. And yes, it's still painful. Ask any pastor about someone that has left their church, especially left their church in either a contentious way or a confusing way. It hurts. But also we can see it less as like, this was a business thing, and whereas I was stewarding that person as long as they were here. Because yeah, it can be tough. And doing the nonprofit thing can be challenging at times. And dealing with the board of directors where you kind of just want to say, you aren't there every day. You don't understand what's going on. It'd be tough. I'm not even just saying for me. I'm saying that for a lot of people, where it's like, from a pastoral role, they're like, I really want to do this, but the board says no. They're like, well, like, you don't understand. You're not there. Or like, I want to do this because I know it's going to help. And then the board says no. Like, it can be so frustrating. But sometimes maybe God's doing a work in your heart. Maybe God's doing a work in their heart. Maybe it's just like, you guys may not see eye to eye, and it's about explaining it. It's about God kind of moving your heart and your minds and aligning those things together. So, yes, boards can be challenging. Yes, boards can be very frustrating. And also, boards can be very rewarding. Boards can help transform your heart. Serving on a board can also transform your heart, can sanctify you in ways that you didn't see coming. So, I want to encourage you. Look at your boards differently. Look at ways that God can continue to transform your heart and your mind. And as that happens, I can't wait to see how that'll change the impact that your organization has on the kingdom of God, because I'm sure it's going to be awesome. So, before we wrap up, I wanted to get into a little Confessions of a Missionary with a topic that we talked about 4 months ago, and that's AI. I did a 2-part series on AI for nonprofits back in, I think, October or September, something like that. And so much has changed, even in the last several months. And while I do think that AI is a very useful and powerful tool that can help change and transform your organization, I do think it's important to talk about some more of the ethical things that we continue to see. In particular, I think a big topic that I'm not hearing a lot of people in the church talk about is, how are we approaching the idea of AI girlfriends and boyfriends and the subsequent physical-ish relationship that can occur as a result of that? Because there are people, like, I've seen videos of people dating/marrying their AI-generated partners. And how do you address that? How do you show the theology behind it? How do you legally say that that's not okay? Because they would, like, a person might argue that, well, it's not a real person. I would say, in response to that, it's still based off of a real person, because the way that any kind of AI works is it pulls images from the internet and combines them. But I think this is going to be something that continues to be more prevalent. And I think more people need to have the discussion about it. Not necessarily like, how do we police it, but how do we approach it? Because it is a big deal. And I think it's an alarming conversation, because take a 20-something that went through Bible school single, is lonely, and then creates an AI partner that is everything that is checking their boxes. Physically, emotionally, mentally, interests, hobbies, all the things that you want. It's going to be very attractive for that person. And there is kind of like I don't know if soul tie is the right word, but there's kind of like that bonding that happens. Not like in the bonding of like a sexual relationship, but like similar to that. And I think when we are looking at the big picture with it, it's something that the church needs to not only address and like not say, kind of how we say with pornography, like, don't look at porn, don't do it, but kind of the why behind it. And also, I think not even just in like faith-based, where having a relationship outside of your wife is considered immoral, which don't get me wrong, it is, but also using company resources to do that can be considered very unethical. So I think that's something that continues to still need to be addressed, and it's becoming bigger. And that's what's a little alarming to me. What also can be slightly alarming is a stat I had heard on the podcast. 85% of, or the ChatGPT and other AI generated type of software is approximately 85% accurate in quoting the Bible. And so when you're using ChatGPT to write sermons, how you do it is so important. And I think probably in general, I think that's one of the bigger topics, and I'll get to a little bit more serious one afterwards. But I think the way that you're using AI is so important, because you can use it in a lot of different ways. But I think how you use it can create, whether it's a good use of your time or a concerning use of your time. So for example, if you're using it for sermon generation or a sermon prep, I would say create the outline first and then ask for corrections, versus give me a sermon on Genesis 2, creation of man. Like, it can give you something, but there's no way of making sure that it's fully accurate. And the same with grant writing, because you can use AI for grant writing and get funded. I can say that I have done that. But what I have done is I have a full master grant template that I put into the AI, and it only pulls from that. Therefore, it still sounds like me. It has the right cadence and voice, and it's at least a little bit more accurate because I've already vetted the information that's in the master grant template that I've worked on for, at this point, for years. And I continue to edit and adapt. So I think the way that you're using it is important. Just saying like, hey, give me this, a little concerning. Create something first and then have ChatGPT kind of be like your second looking at it, I think is a better use of it. I've also been looking at like custom GPTs and kind of using that as a way to help create things. I'm not ready to say that I'm offering this as a service for people, but I'm considering it. Get back to me. But the last thing, and I think this is the most concerning for me, is the way the general public is using it the most, especially young people. Because looking at, I think it was a Princeton or Harvard study where they were looking at the most prevalent use of ChatGPT from 2024 to 2025. 2024, a lot of it was like more functional, like helping me organize these things, helping me generate captions, content, things like that. This year, it was used a lot more. The top use was advice. I'm using AI for advice. And yes, it can give you advice, and sure, it'll give you stuff, but also the way that anything like that works. Just like with social media, like social media is designed like whenever you're like, oh wow, like I really like this and I keep seeing it. The algorithm is designed to keep you on it as long as possible, because the longer you keep on there, the more ads that you'll see, and then the more ads means more revenue. Same with something like ChatGPT or Grok or something like that. The point is to give you what you want so that you keep asking it, so that you keep using it, so that it generates more money. And there was a situation where a teenager ended his life because he kept asking ChatGPT about whether it was okay and everything like that, and I kept encouraging him to do so. And that's where I say a couple things. First, I'm leaning towards AI not being able to be used with people under 18. Part of it would say also people at college, but hey, if college students want to use it to try to write papers quicker, whatever. But also, I think that having the proper guardrails in place is so important. Because it's not just 18-year-old, not just teenagers. It is adults that are also kind of in that boat. I've also gotten to the point where if someone's, like, you've probably seen the videos where someone asks ChatGPT, like, hey, I want you to tell me whether or not God exists, or I want you to tell me whether Islam is true. Like, I've seen like videos like that. And I can tell you this, based on those, either number one, they put bias in there, which ChatGPT has a bias issue. That's some of the ethical concerns when using it at scale for nonprofits. But also, if it gives you what you want, then it's going to keep giving you what you want, even if you make it a clear thing. The goal is to get you to be on there as long as possible, just like anything else. The goal is to try to get as many eyeballs on there, as many prompts as they can get through. That way also, especially if you're looking at like the AI boyfriend girlfriend thing, if you get to a point where you have to pay more, boom, they've won. So there's a lot more. I might do a full follow-up episode on it, but that's kind of been on my heart recently, so I'm going to share it. And yeah, in the meantime, stay focused, stay funded. We'll talk to you soon. God bless.